Hey everybody, so I've come up with a really interesting synergy between the stun baton and the coral oscillator to make some pretty interesting combos, and really excited to show you this clip. It's actually sort of part of a build challenge that I was hoping to make the VP20D viable. I was also looking to make the stun baton viable, and it happened to work out that they go together really well. So I'll show a couple of the combos that you can do with this build first, and then we'll jump into some PvP matches and ranked and talk about those. So the first combo is pretty standard. It's just your coral oscillator into Zimmerman and then the stun baton. So this is very much like the dagger. You end off with the assault armor if they don't do anything, like no expansion deploy. If they do the expansion deploy and you have to counter it with your assault armor, the nice thing about the stun baton, like the dagger, is that you can then go right back into another punish. This is what you typically use against lower weight ACs that are easier just to finish off with this slightly less damaging combo than our other options. By the way, your coral oscillator will also be ready nearly at the end there, so actually at the end, so you could just add that on if you needed to. This is for heavier enemies, so first I'm going to stagger this enemy. We'll pretend that he pops the armor, so I've re-staggered them. Now you're going to do a charged stun baton, and you're going to use the delayed detonation to guarantee the charged coral oscillator, which was really cool. I was excited to find a way to make that guaranteed in a combo. Like some of my other coral oscillator combos in my other builds, you can also do a forced sort of soft lock break into a similar idea here. So I'm just going to do that here, showing how you would typically do that. So here we counter him, going to do the stun baton, and then I'm just going to do the standard version here first, and then I'll show you the soft lock version here now. So this would be for something like terminal armors on heavy bipeds or other heavy builds. Someone who's not going to use an expansion, and so you can't chain off of the assault armor into restagger. So, and then one other thing too that I did forget to mention, which is that you have to practice following up the assault armor with the charged stun baton because you can't input it too early, just so you know, or it won't register. While we're getting to it, one thing I do want to mention is that the stun baton's animation is not long enough to have the coral oscillator off cooldown if you stagger them with it. So, but it's close. So if you can just delay staggering them so that you don't do it with the coral blade, but rather you do the follow-up Zimmerman, it will let you chain off another coral oscillator slash at the end. So what I try to do is initiate by A-being in either Zimmerman into coral oscillator or Zimmerman into kick into coral oscillator, and then do a follow-up Zimmerman shot at the end there to trigger the stagger. Most mechs will get staggered in that sort of range. This build doesn't reach quite as high of stagger thresholds as like my pulse blade build does with the javelin betas, the Zimmerman, and the pulse blade. So the coral oscillator does about 950, I believe, on the light slash, and then the Zimmerman does 600, and the missiles here, we have to use these missiles just because they're able to make the legs work for this weight. You could swap out the legs for something that has just a little bit more leg load, but I felt like this was a nice balance and gave me a good mix of speed. But I think it's the grid legs are probably just optimized a little better. But I like the look of this, and I was hoping to keep these legs in a build, so decided to keep them anyways. Yeah, so this opponent isn't popping his expansion, so I had to pop my assault armor at the end there just to squeak in some extra damage on the combo. There is an argument to be made though for like not doing it on the first initiation unless you're like really close to being staggered. Just because you might want to save it for when they pulse armor later. If they're not running terminal armor, you might want to just save it so you can get like a changed true combo the next time. For vertical like leaning builds or like lambs, anything that's unlikely for you to be able to assault armor punish, I usually would just throw in the assault armor punish, or just save it either as a punish or as a just free stagger later on, because it's not going to do much for you if it's unreliable to get the re-stagger off if they're going in the air a lot and then dropping as soon as they activate the pulse armor. Another thing too about this build is you do run quite a bit less EN capacity. It's the second highest, but or well, no, I shouldn't say that because I guess the world generator is tied for Santai. But the build does actually make use of the extra EN supply for that compromise, and so this generator is more optimal than the Santai. It's needed for the coral blade and then to support this full weapon load, because this build can't really purge anything. You need to keep everything in order to have your options open and keep pressure at all ranges. And so yeah, not running the Santai lets our total recharge time be less than if I was running the Santai on this build. And then secondly, you also have another change that I noticed with this build, which is that your post training EN, like immediate, like full, not full battery, but like the amount of EN you get right away as soon as your recharge starts. So you start with, I think this one gets like 1200 energy points, versus the Santai is like 800 and something. So you do notice that though, like as soon as my generator is drained and then I get my big chunk of battery to start off with back, it's much bigger, and so I can do more actions. That is one nice thing about this generator that I've noticed versus the Santai. But yeah, you just keep in mind you will be working with a little bit less EN capacity, and don't forget that the flugel is not very EN efficient as the Kikaku. I did try the Kikaku, but you really do need that AB thrust, and also having the better QB dodge is helpful for these more lighter weight melee builds. So that's kind of what I expected when it came out, and has held to be true. Flugel is better for more evasive, lighter weight melee builds, but the Kikaku is better for when you have the tankiness to just like AB in slowly and take some hits. And I had another thought too, which is get into the habit, if you're going to run this build, of swapping off the Coral Oscillator and keeping the Stun Baton equipped. Remember that the Coral Oscillator is a cooling weapon, so it doesn't get a penalty for reload. And the Stun Baton is very quick to come back, so you don't want to ever have to be weapon swapping at inopportune times. And in particular, one thing to know about the Stun Baton is you never, even with shotgun extending, you do not have time to weapon swap into charge Stun Baton. It must already be equipped when you stagger them if you want to get the charge Stun Baton follow-up, which is kind of why this build makes use of the light slashes first and then counter assault armors into the charge Stun Baton, just to make that more reliable. But that being said, you'll find, especially with heavier like bipeds, heavier builds that don't run like some interrupt weapons or like super threatening double shoulder lasers, for example, you can find opportunities to trade with it that I didn't think would work, but it has been going pretty successfully for me for those bigger builds that are slower. I'm actually trading into their attacks with the charged Stun Baton, and that's a devastating hit, both in damage and in impact buildup when the detonation goes off. So yeah, always having the Stun Baton equipped while the Coral Oscillator is heat or cooling is just a good habit to get into. You'll notice here that I definitely needed the Flugel's AP thrust over the Kikaku's in order to close the gap here, just because I do not have the stability of my other melee builds on this one, and you really do have to shorten that time that you're spending taking antigen hits, for example. Yeah, so there you can really see the unreliability of the stud baton versus the dagger in getting its punish when you have to do a weapon swap. You have to be like extremely close if you're going to do a shotgun extend, so it's just best habit to always try to have the stun baton at the ready so that you don't miss those opportunities. Kind of tricky when you're doing a coral oscillator initiation though, but yeah, just trying to make sure you do the weapon swap just before you do the follow-up Zimmerman shot from your coral oscillator so that it's ready to go at a moment's notice. I do really feel the lack of Kakaku's extra melee thrust and melee thrust energy conservation against these particular builds. But we do need the Flugel's other stats in so many other matchups, so it's not impossible to land it. It's just a little difficult when they're this fast, but you just got to make sure you don't burn too much energy melee thrusting too aggressively. Just to wait or pick the opportunity early and land your Zimmermans. I really should have gone for the charged coral oscillator here, but I failed to remember to do it. One thing else to mention on it, by the way, while I have a clip of it, you don't have time to shotgun stagger extend when you do the stun baton plant with the charge attack. So as soon as you've landed it, switch weapons and start the coral oscillator. They will have time to move briefly, but they won't be able to escape it. However, if you try to shotgun stagger extend, you'll slow down and you won't actually guarantee the charged coral oscillator. If you're wondering why I have a different right shoulder in a couple of these matches, I was still just playing with this build, trying to figure out what the optimal choice was before I settled on those split missiles. Yeah, so there you could see he did have time to damage me, but he couldn't escape the charged coral oscillator because of the mini stun that applies with the stun baton's detonation. Interesting to note though, shields will be able to block both the stun baton's detonation and the coral oscillator, so you wouldn't want to do this combo against shield users. Just go for the regular coral slash in that case. All right, guys, that's all I have for you for at the moment. But yeah, enjoy the new double melee build and enjoy that new synergy between those two melee weapons. In particular, the stun detonation on the stun baton, I felt like was the only real way to make that weapon stand out over the dagger and make up for its like lack of melee thrust speed versus the dagger and its unreliability. It does have very poor vertical tracking, by the way, so you'll often miss them if they're slightly above you or below you. So had to work for it, but found a viable way to make this build work. And the changes to the flugel really helped unlock it because I needed more movement speed and the ability to stay close because the stun baton's melee thrust is so bad. But now that we have a melee thrusting booster that also has decent boost speed and enough at least to make the coral oscillator thrust work, we've got new potential abilities with synergizing different melee weapons. So here's an example, and enjoy the build.